Pod. Pod.
You alright, mate?
Yeah, it's been a funny old year. Got married a few weeks ago, so that was...
I know, I saw that. Yeah, congratulations on that.
Cheers. Yeah, we're supposed to, be doing it over there, but obviously Corona.
Yeah, it was meant to be in France, wasn't it?
Yeah, because T's from the south of France. So yeah, fingers crossed we'll be able to do something. Well, you're invited anyway.
Yeah. Well, when we get the chance, we can have a little party, can't we?
Oh, it's going to be a big one, dude.
Yeah, or a big one. Yeah.
Cheers for doing this, guy. Anyway, and thanks for taking a look at the questions and stuff, because I know the Paddingtons didn't bother. So,
why break a habit of a lifetime?
Just give us an idea about your background in general photography and how you ended up being in and around that indie scene in the noughties.
Absolutely. I mean, I grew up in London, so was always like immersed with whatever music or scene was going on. And in the early 2000s, I was living in Camden Town, so that was like everything's on your doorstep. You walk out the door and go down to all the Barfly, Coco, when it was still Camden Palais, and just a plethora of venues, and the record stores were still there. The market was happening. So I got back into photography around 2004, picked up a camera and was just as a hobby, going to shows, friends' shows, and started shooting that way. And I guess it coincided with the first generation of digital. So that made it easier to gain entry into that field, because before, it's film and it's expensive, processing labs and all that. And this was kind of that instant gratification of digital, where you take a photo and you see oh, boom, there it is. That's like awesome feeling. So I just continued as a hobby, and then within 10 months, I actually got an email from NME saying, come in for an interview. And I guess that had come from just putting stuff online. And back in those days, it was fan forums, and post your Flickr link or whatever to the fan forum, and then the kids could see them. And it was just a kind of snowball effect. So yeah, the NME went in for the interview, and they were like, want you to start shooting? So I was like, this is amazing. This is like what I'd, set out to try and achieve. And it happened real quickly. And then it just kind of took off from there, because obviously that platform, Weekly Magazine, they got all the relationships with the publicists, the bands. And yeah, it was just kind of thrown in at the deep end, which was awesome.
Do you remember the first photograph that kind of put you in touch with maybe what the NME had seen, that really impressed
how they were? And it was because Libs had kind of had their first split, and then Peter was all over town doing his stuff with Baby Shambles and Pat and Drew. So I think it was really an intimate shot of Peter from it was the Macbeth, I think, actually.
Yeah.
Higher spot. And he was playing a harmonica, which actually Adam Green gifted to him, which I found out later on, shortly.
Right.
So it was this kind of nice combination, but that ran as a double page spread. And I think that was, they saw me taking these kind of more intimate pictures of Peter. And I guess that was probably their impetus to bring me in or whatever. But really that was all there because of you guys, the Paddingtons. Those were the first early shows. I remember one with you. It was at 93 Feet East in Whitechapel.
There was so many. Yeah, was that the PlayStation thing?
No, it wasn't a PlayStation.
No.
Before they had started cottoning on and trying to put their brands associated with cool bands. It was just a regular kind of show. It was the Rakes, Pads.
That was right. I do remember
Heroes.
Yeah. 93 feet each. Was that on Brick Lane?
Exactly, off Brick Lane, yeah.
Yeah.
And that's it. There were so many gigs, but that was probably in 2004, and that's when I met you lot. Because essentially I was really immersed in a totally different musical scene and genre. It was that drum and bass jungle scene. My teenage friends were all like MCs, producers, because they're bedroom DJs, essentially. So again, it was like an accessible art form that people with not a lot of cash could get involved in. And so I go to pirate radio stations and all those warehouse parties, but that was becoming commercialized and losing its edge. And you know how it is, things evolve over time. People drop in or drop out of the scene. And yeah, I was like, oh man, guitar music's kind of making a comeback. Because the whole Britpop thing for me was almost a turn off. It was just too much shoved down your throat. So yeah, I guess I did a 180 and came back to guitar music. And the bands that I met was the Paddingtons and the Maccabees and Foals, all these sort of that generation. And it was exciting. And like, I was like stoked to be like, oh wow, here's another scene on my doorstep. And people like yourself and everyone, it was so inclusive that was refreshing too.
Everyone was just pals basically, weren't they? Yeah.
Yeah, you came away with this feeling like no one's being excluded, and no one's judging anyone. Everyone's going out making an effort to get dressed up, and it was a lot of love. And I don't know, it was just it's kind of a beautiful time.
And did you have some like personal favorite bands to take photographs of? I guess the best ones live usually tended to be the best photos. Would that be true?
Yeah, of course. So when you're looking for a live photo, you're looking for that animation and like people who aren't just standing there strumming the instruments and looking that too cool for school thing, which I guess was a phase for bands. But no, our generation, everyone came out with gusto and kind of turned that around. But I guess the Hives were a great live band. Obviously the Strokes, Baby Shambles and all their offshoots, Libertines. But Jarvis Cocker for me is still one of the greats who I love to shoot live. Iggy Pop moves like a million miles an hour, but he's just this little ball of energy. And of course he's like legendary, so that helps as well. But yeah, acts like that, I guess I prefer to go, if I'm getting commissioned to shoot a band, I want it to be something that I vibe with personally. But I think the challenge is like, yeah, not knowing a band or thinking, oh, this one could be tough to shoot, and then bringing something out of that is equally as satisfying as like someone who's just going crazy on stage. But yeah, back in the day, I guess Selfish Cunt, they were a good band as well. All those Rhythm Factory bands, it was awesome.
And I suppose it's like, looking at all your photos, you clearly have like a personal relationship with all the bands as well. It's like, is a level of trust you have to build up with people. Yeah,
for sure. I mean, I always thought like long term, even though you don't know how long something's going to last, or I didn't know that I was going to be doing this still 15 years later, but I'm super happy that I've been able to. But yeah, over time, you get to know bands more, and that scene was pretty open too, and not a lot of ego. So yeah, you build up the trust, and it goes two ways. And over time, these things kind of grow. And like, for example, you might have started out shooting live stuff only with that band, and then they like you and like having you around and trust you, and suddenly you're doing an album cover for them or something, which is something I really take pride in, because that's lasting. And hopefully something iconic or resonates. Because, when we were kids, we were putting up physical album copy, the artwork on our walls as posters and stuff. And yeah, that's part of music world that I love, and try and get more of those album covers under my belt.
Oh, which album covers have you done out of interest?
I've done a Franz Ferdinand single cover for Ulysses. That was a pretty funny, instantaneous one, because they vary. Some are sit down and you talk about it more like a music video, like what's the look, what's the treatment going to be? Does the musician have a specific thing in mind, or are we just going to go for whatever? All different types, but that one was very instantaneous. But done the Baby Shambles one, a Harmar Superstar one, Adam Green. I've done about 10. I'm trying to remember them all right now. But, oh yeah, Delicate Steve. But yeah, they're all equally as valued because, like I say, that's part of the art form that I love.
So what's your take on that then? Like when you've got a new photographer in and around, are you a bit wary of them at first, or are you just kind of loving it?
Do you know what? Like, I think with us guys, like, we probably didn't even think about it too much, and we just like to kind of like the relationship with someone like that is it definitely has to be trusting, obviously, because like when there's certain things around that you don't want to probably make the press or whatever, like obviously there has to be some kind of trust in there that you're not going to be like pictured doing something.
Yeah, I was going to allude to that. Exactly.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, there's certain things that stay out of other people's business. It's not their business, that remains between you and the band.
Yeah, that was going to be one of my questions actually. Like, have you ever been in a position where you've been taking, you'd taken a picture of something that you think that you probably shouldn't be, or like I guess like. Have you been in like a position where like what's the most like weird position you've been in?
I think it's more like you say, once you have the trust and the band are familiar and like having you there and there's that implicit trust in place, I think you're less worried about what you're documenting. It's more about what you're going to put online or who you're going to share it with. Are you going to submit that? No. And that, like I say, that's for your eyes only, yours and the band's only. And there's certain memories you don't always want to share, But yes, I've had instances where researchers for TV shows have called me up and been like, oh, we've seen this, or do you have this photo of someone looking this way? And you're like, yeah, mate, but that's not for you. And no, I don't want to get paid in that way when it's like, you're going to lose all the trust and you're going to break that relationship. And what for? Like a few grand, maybe even more, but it's
never worth it.
No, it's
like all the respect in that time like that everybody had for each other. Like it's just disgusting that like some of those journalists or whatever just want to do that.
And those are short-term people who, to me, are in it for short-term gain or to make a name, but they're not really in it for the love of the scene and the music. Of course. Yeah. Them sorts get avoided, and also they get found out pretty early on. So,
just looking at your photos, obviously it's a very exciting time, like in and around the Baby Shambles, I imagine. Are there any like standout stories from those gigs that obviously probably involved you as well, Tom?
Well, I got one that stands out, maybe for the wrong reasons, but also it showed the power of those Baby Shamble gigs. It was the Astoria one where Peter didn't turn up, and it was like 3 hours and getting close to curfew, and the kids just went mental and started ripping up the place. And then the security got heavy-handed and were like picking up cables and like literally whipping kids, and it was a bad scene. But that was obviously memorable. But I think in terms of like just the great shows were like, I think they improvised a lot on stage, in those early shows when Pat was still in the band. So I remember a Christmas Eve Queens of Noise gig at Barfly, and I got to tell you that, that venue, it's probably 150.
Yeah, tiny. It's like it's a little bit like the Adelphi and all.
Yeah, I think the Adelphi's even slightly bigger, but that floor was bouncing to the point where I was like, I don't know if this building's up to code where it's going to hold the floor. But yeah, it was just an amazing manic show. Like they were playing Gang of Gin and songs like that, all these favorites and the ones you don't really hear that often. And I just remember thinking, yeah, shit, this is like mind-blowingly amazing. And you kind of think, oh, this is going to just the way it is for a while, but there's so many factors as to why that couldn't be the case. But and then you're craving for those kind of shows again, in years gone by. But Yeah, I don't know. There was a Brixton show they did that I loved. I don't know, most of them in those early days were.
I guess we took them things for granted. But thinking about it right now as well. Imagine how much you'd love to go to that show right now.
Yeah, we didn't maybe realize. I think we realized that we were in a good place, but we didn't think it could just end.
Yeah,
you know how it kind of did, but
all seemed to be over as fast as it started, kind of thing.
Yeah, and when you're younger, you're like a bit naive, I guess, and thinking, oh yeah, here we are for the long haul. Because it did feel for a point in time where, especially, I mean, all over the UK, but in London, where I was primarily based, it was just like 6 nights a week. You could go to see 3 or 4 bands and then DJs afterwards, and it just was amazing. There was just So I guess we did maybe take it for granted a little bit, but not on purpose.
Obviously, I want to ask you about bands like the Strokes, because judging from some of your captions and stuff on Instagram, you had quite a good relationship with Albert Hammond. Is that right?
Yeah, that came about also through 5 O'Clock Heroes, I guess. They were opening on tour in Europe with them, and I got invited to come along, and then I had a couple of commissions to the NME in a short space of time. I guess it was Album's first solo record. And yeah, we hit it off. And then actually in 2007, NME wanted someone to be a correspondent on the ground in New York. So I was asked to do that. And then when I moved over, those were kind of the first mates that I had over here. So yeah, it was like a really easy transition to New York because of those guys, I guess. And their extended crew and family, such as like the Dead Trees and Matt Romano. So yeah, it was kind of like very organic and natural. It was awesome.
Is that Matt? Was he like the drum tech or something?
He was, yeah. And then he opened that bar, Black Market, and that's where everyone hung out for about 5 years.
Yeah, I suppose we've not really talked too much about the community of bands in New York. Obviously, talk about it a lot in the UK, but was it quite like a big community around the Strokes?
I'd say it was more selective in a way. Like maybe because when I arrived, the Strokes had already been going for 5 years, and on their 3rd record, I guess. But it was an East Village kind of scene, and it was as you'd expect, kind of this cool New York happening. So there was people with names around, but if you were in it, it was like very inclusive again, and felt like family. But I guess it was a bit more closed off. Like London was just more of a free for all, and it wasn't about names so much. But yeah, honestly, for me in New York, when I discovered the DIY scene going on over here in Brooklyn, that was when I was like, oh, these are like the people that I'm like, feel like awesome to have met them, because they grew up in Brooklyn. They've been playing music since they're kids, and they're running these venues 6 nights a week also, which is what I missed about London a lot when I first moved here. And then, the venue is called Shea Stadium, and it's set up by a band called the So-So Glows. So they had that running until 2018, and then they were forced to shut down. But yeah, it was actually probably the longest running DIY venue. But yeah, you had a whole plethora in North Brooklyn where I am, and Death by Audio, Glasslands, 285 Kent. So you literally had this strip of DIY venues, and it was way more reminiscent in that way of London in that sense.
What year was that then?
2007, came over here, and I was coming back for like the main festivals, Glastonbury, Reading, stuff like that. Initially to about 2010, and then I was doing more of the American festivals and stuff. But yeah, 2007 September, I moved here basically to cover CMJ, and then have been here ever since.
Yeah, fair. Bit more exciting than London.
I mean, I guess I'd lived in London for 27 years, born and raised. Right, yeah. So it was like, I wouldn't have probably, in my mind, I wouldn't have left London for anywhere else except New York, because I've been visiting since around 2002, and I was like, enamored with it, and already had a bunch of friends here. So it was it was definitely the spot to move to. But yeah, I've had a daughter since I've been here, got married. So yeah, a lot's happened. I guess it's been a third of my life now. It's mental.
Whereabouts in London were you from originally?
From North London, good North London Jewish boy.
You're an Arsenal fan, not you?
That's right, Guna. Yeah, my stepdad Mike took me. He had a season ticket all through the 70s and 80s, and they were so bad. He gave up his season ticket, and then I started getting into it. He took me to the games, and then they started becoming amazing. And he didn't have a season ticket no more. But yeah, you could get into the ground. Like, I remember paying £6 to sit on the lower west stand, I think it was. You queue up on the day, get on the tube, and walk to the ground and pay your £6 and you're in. But those days are gone. So now I've been watching on streams, and it used to be a nightmare. You couldn't get any football here. And now it's like there's more football on the TV here than there is in the UK, I'm told.
Yeah, I was going to say, but it's a lot easier at like 3:00 on a Saturday to watch it in America.
Definitely. I mean, yeah, I used to wake up at 7, and then there's a supporters bar down the road, and they'd have like the Liverpool game, the Arsenal game, and the Chelsea game going on. So it was like wall to wall. Everyone's drinking because they're expats. So it's like 7:30, the beer's flowing, and that was fun for a while. But then, yeah, I was like, no, I need to just be able to stay in bed sometimes and watch this.
I saw, because I was over there for my 30th, and he's a Champions League fan, and when I was there, and I did try and book a table at Jamie Carragher's bar, but I think it was sold out.
I didn't even know he had a bar here.
He's got like an Irish bar over there, I think, yeah.
Well, maybe that's the main Liverpool supporters club then.
Yeah, so we ended up in some sports bar by the river, which was quite good. But
always end up in an Irish bar, don't we? Wherever we go. Honestly, I think one of the times that I went to New York, ended up in an Irish bar. Just like, why am I in an Irish? Like, I don't know. It's like always happens.
Just a lure of it, isn't there? I don't know.
Yeah, same with Barcelona as well. I went there once.
That pint of Guinness looks good, even better abroad, I tell you. It reminds me of home. But yeah, I have a funny little story, actually. Not so music related. I was leaving Texas for South by Southwest. I wasn't quite ready to go back to New York, so went and met a friend in Kansas because I'd never been there before. Didn't realize it's the biggest Arsenal supporters like club or whatever in America, and it's the cup final against Hull. So that would have been 2017
don't
or 16. Well, we all know the score, but basically I'm like staying in this cheap motel, got no money. I had a 6-pack of beer, had 3 left, and I'm like, I get booted out of the motel in the morning. I'm like to the guy, like, oh, it's the cup final. Like, he has no idea what that is. I'm like, can I just stay? He's like, no, someone's moving into that room. You need to like fuck off, basically. So I take my little holdall. I'm like, I can see downtown, so I'm like, all right, head that way. Step out the motel. First thing that happens to me, a guy asks me for a cigarette and then wants to sell me some meth. And I'm like, no, it's good. It's like 10 a.m. No meth for me, thanks, right now. So I make my way downtown. I see it's dead. It's like, there's nothing happening. I'm like, all right, look for something sports related. So I see the college basketball arena, because all the college sports here are massive. It's crazy. And then I hear some rumblings of noise. And I'm like, okay, it's a bar, it's open. Go in, it's like a basement thing, and there's hundreds of American Gooner fans. And I'm like, yes, found the game. Walk in, got no money for beer. I'm waiting on a check to clear. So I had very little money, and like my friend isn't around till later. So I crack open a beer, find like an empty plastic glass, pour it, and a guy catches me. He's like, what are you doing? I'm like, money's tight, but he's like, fuck that. You got an accent? Where are you from? I'm like, London, Camden. He's like, what? Yo, dude here from London, Arsenal fan. We're buying him drinks. So we're down as well at that point. And then Cazorla takes that beautiful free kick. And yeah, the rest is history. But then they took me out afterwards for cocktails and showed me around Kansas. And that was a pretty awesome little adventure that turned out good.
Yes.
Kansas City, if you're ever there, put on an Arsenal shirt.
I've seen like the Cribs post about your photography stuff. Is that another band you had a good relationship with?
Absolutely. I mean, we all love those guys. I mean, Tom will obviously be able to attest to this, but yeah, they're just the best. And they've always stuck to what they do, and they do it well. And yeah, got taken on tour with them in 2009-10 for the Ignore the Ignorant tour in the UK, where Adam Green was supporting, and he had just released his Minor Love record, which I did the cover for. So that was like just an incredible tour with mates, and obviously getting to see the UK again after a few years of living here. And every show was just mental and crowd surfing. And of course, Johnny Marr was playing at that point. So it was awesome to like get to know him and spend like a month with him and be like, oh, this is a bit surreal. I'm just hanging out with a Smith every day. And he's like asking me if I want a beer or I'm all right, and introduced us to his family. And yeah, that was definitely one of the tours I remember most fondly. And yeah, I'd been seeing them since, again, like 2004. I remember the first gig was Stylish Riots, was a club night, and they headlined. And you're just smitten right off the bat, you know. It's these guys from Wakefield, and you're like, damn, like Wakefield's possibly cooler than us then.
Yeah, as soon as you watch it, as soon as I saw them like the first time, there was just something different about the Cribs, wasn't there?
Yeah, I mean, and then when you talk to them afterwards and having a pint with them, and I don't know, it's universal love for those guys. I think all our American friends, all the English lot, everyone's a fan of the Cribs. But yeah, that was like amazing for them to welcome me in on that tour. And obviously every time they come and play New York, I am there front and center and taking photos and then going out for bevies with them.
Yeah, and they must have provided some pretty good photos live. Obviously used to be a bit of a mad band live back in the day, didn't they?
Yeah, well, Ryan was always cut up from something and bleeding. So that's always fun. Yeah, actually, like one of my favorite portrait sessions with them was with Lee Ronaldo, because obviously he did the song with them, and we went to his place in the city and spent the afternoon just talking about music and looking at guitars and him showing us memorabilia. So that, yeah, again, was like something you got to tick off the list and be like, wow, shit, that's pretty cool.
I think you're probably like our most comprehensive guest in terms of different people you've worked with and different type of artists you worked with in terms of like some major pop stars and stuff. I mean, what's that been like? What's like the difference between like photographing the Baby Shambles in Barfly to like R.E.M. at Wembley?
Yeah, I mean, I think for me it was like you want to accept every assignment, every commission, every opportunity to shoot, and it didn't matter so much. I mean, for me, the venue was always secondary. So like shooting Live Earth at Wembley Stadium with Madonna and Beastie Boys and Phil Collins, whoever else, it's just like you're in the moment and you're not thinking about what's going on around you, apart from when you're looking at the crowd for some crowd shots. So in the live thing, you got the barrier still. You're the closest you can get to the artist, the musician, but you're still there, you know, doing your thing and they're doing their thing. But the size of the venue never bothered me. And I think, again, being thrown in the deep end at NME, when you're like, all right, Isle of Wight Festival, first time shooting, go shoot the Prodigy. And you're like, oh, okay, hang on. It's a lot of strobe light. It's going to be from the side and back. So you're like, how do you make this work? But you just find a way. Those smaller venues, if you got a flash, you're fine. You're going to make it work. If you're just using ambient light, it can be real tricky. But then again, you always come away with something where you're like gratified. But I think for the portrait shoots, it was more about, okay, I haven't met this famous person. You might have 50 minutes. You might have an hour and a half. You got to create that kind of bond quickly. And once you have that in place, that's equally as important as being able to take the photo as well. It's getting that rapport.
So like in music sometimes, like you can make, you know, like when recording or whatever, you can make an accident that really works. Like, do you find that with pictures as well? Like,
maybe more when it's like a outdoor, no location, you're just taking a stroll with the artist and you're basically like finding stuff along the way. Those can be some of the best because you'll see someone walking a dog or whatever and you're like, oh, can I borrow that dog, that husky? It looks, and then whatever it is, or someone walks into the shop by accident. You thought you wanted the frame clear, but then someone walked into it and actually made it better. For sure, there's happy accidents like that. And if you're using film, there's double exposures and stuff like that. But when you're shooting for magazines, a lot of the time it's like you got your brief. Stylistically, they want something like this. So you might want to take a few shots in a different style and pop those in on the end. But yeah, it always varies. Like, for example, with Kathleen Hanna, I had like 90 minutes. It was just me and her in a studio. And that can be daunting if you're like, oh, if you don't get that bond or rapport going, then it's like, that's a long time to be shooting, you know? So yeah, like I say, getting that rapport going is kind of key in finding the common ground. And then as you shoot more bands of whatever ilk, you have more people in common. So I could say to this person, oh, I've had an interaction with this person who you're friends with. And then that's like an icebreaker or whatever. And
cool.
But yeah, I think if you're daunted, I mean, it's good to have some nerves, but you can't let it get the better of you or the best of you. And you got to remember that these are, they are like talents and people in their own right who you respect. But one-on-one, you got to just be like, at the end of the day, they're a person just like you and me. So, you know.
Yeah. Does that become like a skill in itself? Like knowing how to talk to different people or kind of like gauging?
I believe so. I believe so. And maybe I have a shtick that works for me and you kind of use that and then you tweak it. But yeah, it gets so much easier when you've built a relationship and then you've got these interactions happen more frequently and then it's just like second nature. But yeah, for those first time meets with like big names, I got to say for the most part, there's very few divas. Some people who you'd expect to be like highly strung are the complete opposite, you know, so you can't go by the persona that you've seen in public. You're going to find out quickly.
Do you have like a massive diva moment?
People late. Courtney Love was one who was quite late, but I expected that, so I wasn't like thrown by it or thought it was disrespectful. I got to say, out of 15 years of shooting, I've only ever probably had one interaction where I was like, walked away and was like, oh God, this person's a dick. And that,
you're not going to say?
No,
I don't. Nah, he's a lovely dick. He's not a total.
Sort of heard.
But no, I don't mind naming it because I'm sure the artist wouldn't give a shit either. But and it wasn't necessarily his fault in this instance. This was a situation where they had a full press day. Pitchfork was assigned their time before me. This is still for the NME. And they went way over time, and you could see he was getting like antsy and a bit frustrated, and they kept pushing it, eating into my time. And then it got to me, and it was just like coincidental that they came back over while me and him are discussing what we're going to do. And they were like, oh, we just need this one more thing. Do you mind? And he kind of just went, blah. And unfortunately that meant he wasn't in the right frame of mind to even start our shoot. I managed to get a few portraits of that moment, actually, which was him pacing around in a circle angrily, going off on his management. So really, I don't blame Ariel Pink. I blame Pitchfork. But yeah, for the most part, I got to say, most people are pretty decent.
I mean, at risk of just like giving you a list of bands to talk about, but because you've like had such a wide range of bands, there's some people we haven't talked about. Like, we haven't really talked much about the Arctic Monkeys, which is a bit mad considering how big they were in that period. But did you start like photographing them early on and kind of follow them through a bit?
I did. I mean, when they came out, it was like a game changer, obviously. And we were all really excited about them. And then they were doing the MySpace thing and doing it on their own terms, which gives them even more like credit and credence, whatever. But I didn't see them until Leeds Festival, and again, 2005 maybe. And they're playing the tent. I think it was a Radio 1 tent or whatever the secondary tents was. Literally within minutes of them starting, I felt bad whoever was playing the main stage because no one was there. The whole tent was as far as you could see, and then outside as far as you could see double. And you're like, shit, something special is going on here. And I was shooting from side to stage, so you really got a sense of like how big they were becoming. And then, yeah, because of work and I got to document them a fair bit. They put on a gig at the Lancashire Cricket Club. Amy Winehouse, the Coral, the Parrots, that Japanese band, Beatles cover band. So I guess it was their mates and people they respected, and that was like an amazing time. But then, like I said, I moved to New York in the autumn of 2007, so they'd only really just started going.
Yeah, I was going to say they did come they came actually quite late on in our kind of little bubble.
2006-07 was really where they had their launch pad moment, and then it just got astronomical and kept growing. But in 2008, they were doing their side projects, Last Shadow Puppets, with Miles Kane, and they came over and played Soundfix, which was a small record store in Williamsburg that's now gone with most of the good stuff from Williamsburg. They just did an acoustic thing, and that was their USA debut. So that was kind of like amazing. And we hung out, and I took some portraits of the lads, and then we all went out drinking like we normally do. So yeah, friendly with Alex when I see him, but he's out in LA, I'm here, and I probably got as much time with them as I could in their busy schedule, and then me moving here. But yeah, their growth was so fast that you're like, hang on, you kind of missed that phase of like, I guess they were in Sheffield and playing all the venues there where you could be more intimate and see them up close. But when they came to America, obviously they hadn't broken here yet. So maybe only for the first year they were playing like venues 500 to 1,000, and then it was just like, oh, they're playing stadiums now, so that kind of sucks.
I actually just found, just on your Instagram, found a picture of Alex Turner, and the caption's quite funny. It says, I think it's gig in 2010, and he said, "This was a famous occasion I was grinded on by Sean Diddy Coombs." Is that Puff Daddy?
that's Diddy. That was funny because obviously it's the Highline Ballroom, a good old venue, but in Manhattan. And yeah, shooting the show, I'm roaming all over. They have a balcony section, and I'm like leaning kind of through it, and I'm pretty low and I'm tall, so I guess maybe my butt was pushed out, and I feel someone like grinding, and I'm like, oh, ha ha, someone, making a joke to their friends, and it goes on for longer than I felt comfortable. And I'm a pretty tactile person, but I'm like, kind of give a shrug, and then just carry on shooting, getting some nice angles, and the light's good or whatever. And then
was he getting some nice angles as well?
Yeah, exactly, mate. It was bump and grind. And and then eventually I'm like, turn around, I'm like, all right, like that. And I look over, and it's Diddy smiling down at me. And I was like, well, all right, it's you, so I'm not going to give you shit. That was pretty funny, actually.
Yeah, because I remember watching some videos where he was like a big fan of them, wasn't he? Like as soon as they kind of got big.
I think he was a big supporter, which is always nice to see, other genres and the people in those genres cross over and enjoy other forms of music. So, yeah. But yeah, he's quite a soft individual, let it be known. He's, from his friction on me anyway, it was, he was gentle. There was a funny time I was on tour with Chris Robinson. This is, he's 90s really, Black Crowes. But so he kind of left the rock and roll and was doing a new project called the Chris Robinson Brotherhood, which is basically a Grateful Dead kind of vibe, jam band, 3-hour sets. And I arrive on tour in Cleveland and find my way to the bus and the venue, and had 2 nights of shooting with him and 2 days of portraits, and we went like record shopping, all this kind of stuff, and thrifting. But on the first night, you're trying to like I said earlier, build that bridge or that rapport. And this was an instance where I was like, kind of put on the spot, and I was like, this will really help break down any kind of like, I'm an outsider coming to the camp, because the tour manager and Chris were getting something out of a bag, and I was like, oh, what's this? And I didn't recognize it, and I'm like, oh, what is this, lads? Like, and he's like, tour manager's like, oh, it's gloop or gloop or goop, and I'm like, not familiar. And he's like, oh, it's basically concentrated mushrooms, very strong, but you only need a little bit. And he's like, you want some? And I'm like, yeah, sure. So I ate this stuff, and I'm waiting to kind of come up, and the gig's starting maybe like 15 minutes in, and I've gone up on the stage to shoot, and I'm like, oh, I wonder when the stuff's going to kick in, because I'm not really feeling anything. And just as I've had that thought, I'm looking through the camera, and then another camera appears, and then quickly in succession, there's like two more, and then it's like, I have 8 cameras. I'm holding 8 cameras right now, and I'm like, okay, definitely feeling it. Let's ride this out. And I'm like, you can do this. You've shot shows before many times, well, with alcohol, obviously, but I was like, you got this, don't worry. And I was in the moment, feeling the music. Definitely mixed that audio and visual components up. So at one point, I'm like, okay.
How did that turn out?
Well, it was a 3-hour show, so there's an intermission. I'm like,
that sounds long.
I go out into the car park to have a cigarette, manage to roll it, see these flashing lights. So of course I'm tripping. So I'm like, ooh, flashing lights, what's going on here? So I walk towards them, and it's an ambulance, and there's a ambulance lady and a guy hunched over, and he's like projectile vomiting, and I'm like, whoa, that's awesome. Are you okay? Like, do you need any help? And she's like, no, I'm trained, thank you. He's good. He's just got to get that out of his system. I'm like, what's wrong with him? Like annoying her, asking all these questions. She's like, oh, it's just a bit too much of this, bit too much of that. He'll be fine, don't worry. So I'm like, walk off, leave her to it, and then get back into shooting. And probably came down about 2 hours after the show, and sat in my hotel room and reviewing the photos. And I'm like, oh, thank fuck, they all came out pretty good. So it was good to know that your sixth sense or whatever it is kicks in, and you're just like, I got this. And I guess that's just knowing your camera and like your lenses and whatever. But yeah, that was pretty funny. And then my girlfriend at the time came, because she was driving her tour van back from Detroit to New York. So she came and picked me up and watched the second night of show. But I definitely had some residual feelings from the mushrooms, which I think she picked up on. But yeah, that was a funny one.
Did I get tempted to do that again then?
Not so much with the mushrooms. Nah, I think it's better. There's certain other things you can take that are probably more appropriate.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm glad I did it, and yeah, tested myself in the astral planes and came back okay.
Yeah, I did want to ask you, I suppose it's a bit more of a serious question, but when we had Mark Bowman on, we kind of asked him how things have changed for music journalism over the years. And I just wondered how it's changed for music photography. Has it changed since like the impact of the internet and everything?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely changed over time. I think there were some digital snobs at the beginning, and then they had to convert. So there was like an even playing field, I guess. But so I'll never say anything bad against digital, because that was like kind of the thing that got me in. I was doing like some graphic design before that, and taking my own photos and like messing around with them. I think the idea originally was to make tour posters, and then the photography kind of took over. But I'd say it's changed in terms, well, now, of course, there isn't anything to shoot, no live music or anything. But yeah, I think digital probably put a lot of people off from before, because the pits, especially at festivals, just became like ridiculous. There was like, I remember at Coachella one year, there was probably 100 photographers there, maybe more, and it felt less special, I guess, and maybe blogs had something to do with that. But again, blogs are great if it gets more music to more people, more new music especially as well. But it's changed for me maybe in the fact that I don't get to as many gigs as I'd like to before. But in terms of the equipment and everything like that, not really, nothing's changed. Yeah, I guess it's just more accessible, so there's more people doing it. But obviously me working in magazines this whole time and then seeing them die off one by one, like NME, Q, I've contributed to for years. It's just sad, and it's like a bleak landscape right now for anyone aspiring or getting into it now. I'm like, where do you want to end up? Because for me, when I started, I was like, oh yeah, if I can get into NME, that's a weekly magazine. They're like the pinnacle, top of the game. But now it's like, where are these outlets? Is everything online? How do you get paid? How do you like live? So I worry about people starting off now, but
all these creative industries have just like kind of followed the same path, I guess, isn't it? It's like, it's just turned out really difficult for everyone.
Yeah, I mean, you think the internet was this great equalizer, and really it's just taken so long for people to adapt, publishing groups and magazines, and there's no advertising revenue. It's, they haven't figured out the way to make it work. Or I just personally don't believe that people don't want a physical copy for the fans to pick something up, like we said about putting shit on your wall. And then for the people contributing, it's like to see your name in print and on paper is like a huge rush every time. So yeah, I don't know. It's all kind of just sad. I don't know what to think about it. I'm just trying to like maintain really, and keep going. But yeah, I don't know. We need more labels, I think, like Rough Trade and these kind of like Domino and ones who really stick by their artists. I think we need that even more now. Partisan is a good new one that, or newish one that I respect what they're doing. But yeah, it's who knows what's going to happen. And I just hope it has some sort of, I don't know what the sense of normality would be now even. So yeah, I guess for me and a lot of my colleagues who were at Q, it's like, now what is kind of, that's where we're at. So yeah, I don't know. What did Bowie say?
You mean that interview about the internet?
Yeah, what did Mark Beaumont, sorry.
Oh, right, I was going to say. Well, he said the numbers online for NME like far outweigh what they were in terms of readers back in the day.
But I say we, I'm not with them anymore, but after 9.5 years, I feel like it's we. But yeah, we always had the biggest traffic online. Even back then, that was not in question. The website just wasn't good enough, and we should have adapted to that more early on, for sure. But yeah, so I don't know. In terms of numbers, NME was, it still has the most traffic out of all the music websites, I believe. So I don't know if that's an indicator of anything except there's just more people online and have more access to computers than they did 10 years ago.
Yeah, and there's obviously a lot of clickbaity stuff going on as well.
Yeah, of course. That's, the traffic, circumventing traffic to your feed or your site, just, for these bullshit clickbait, like you said, it's horrible.
Yeah. But you won't believe what, I don't know, the Saved by the Bell cast look like now or something like that. That's kind of links. We ask people if there's like an album or a song that kind of makes them most nostalgic about that period, but I guess you kind of had the best seat in the house for a lot of those gigs. So is there a gig you can think of where you're kind of completely blown away by the band at the time?
I don't know, because honestly, felt like such this big extended family between like Paddingtons, Maccabees, Rakes, Arctic Monkeys, Mystery Jets, Art Brut, Baby Shambles, Cribs, Adam Green, we talked about, Futureheads. Did I say We Are Scientists? Black Lips, all these bands. Like, for me, it was all new and exciting. So it's hard to pick one out of those, because I was like fervently around those bands and going to as many of their shows as possible. As for me, it was the bigger element of this like this crew or this extended like musical family, and everyone was doing great. But again, maybe this isn't because they were 90s too, but Brian Jonestown Massacre, first time I saw them at the Astoria, fuck me, I was like, this lived up to everything I'd hoped for. You'd seen the documentary, and then I actually ended up meeting their manager when I moved to New York, and he told me some cool stories. But yeah, we went in a big crew. So this was before I was even on this side of being in the industry and being like the mainstay or whatever you want to say. I was still a fan, like a regular punter, and we went, all my like friends and homies, we went probably 20, 30 of us in the group, bought tickets, got some MDMA and danced our fucking socks off. And yeah, it was just like, that was affirmation for me. Like, there's so much to explore, and I've got this whole scene to like delve into. That was definitely a moment. And I guess I just started maybe shooting, but it was still hobbyist, still for fun. But that was kind of maybe something that pushed me into wanting to do it full time. Brian Jonestown live. And they didn't fight and they didn't sabotage the show, and it was amazing. So that was a plus. But maybe we'll circle back around to that, because I'm sure there is someone who should jump out. But I've just been to so many shows now, and not to say they all blend in, but yeah, it's hard to think back now. But yeah, there was too many amazing times. But in terms of like Paddington stuff, like really that, I didn't want to underplay how them bringing me in and like as a friend and like a colleague, it just felt so special. And I love what they were doing. Like anytime Heart Song came on, for example, the hairs on the back of your neck go up for me. And I was, yeah.
Was that one of your?
Oh, for sure. That was a big one for me.
Yeah, that's actually probably my favorite song to play live. That was
Heart Song, You and Me. But yeah, 52 Pound. It was all great, man. Like, and I guess, yeah, I was like, I was untainted because I come from that totally different scene of that like drum and bass, and this was all brand new. So to meet the Paddington straight off the bat and feel that love and the family vibes, and that's always hold dear in my heart, and you know, probably helped also push me into where I am today. So thanks, guys.
No, we spoke about this on a lot of episodes, but yeah, just the whole feeling around that whole scene was just like, yeah, it was just a bunch of
special times. It was, yeah. I mean, fuck, I was just running around town with my camera, with my mates, you know, like me and Andrew Kendall were in each other's pockets a lot, and we'd go, so wherever, Yulu, there's a show that, and then we'd go Water Rats, and I mean, it was just never ending in the best way possible, until it did end. But it just was, yeah, I mean, incredible. I feel fortunate to have, because, you know, people always look back, and I do too. I'm like, oh shit, I wish I'd been around in the 70s for Johnny Thunders and Dead Boys and that whole Lower East Side scene. And then you're like, oh, I wish I was there in the 80s, 90s. There's always something, Sonic Youth and whomever. But we really had it good, man.
People are going to talk about that time, like the same kind of
nostalgia, like, you know, and like wishing they had been there for sure. And we were, so we should be thankful. And we all played a part. And again, we created good vibes. And I mean, you guys playing Love Music, Hate Racism, putting your like heart and soul into everything and inspiring. And I feel like Love Music, Hate Racism should be, or something like that should be going on right now, to be honest. But
yeah, no. Do you know what I was thinking that when, because I went to some of the protests in lockdown, and I was just thinking, we literally, obviously it's been going on forever, but that shit should be going on right now, yeah. Because
way more
music's such a big, powerful platform to
it's a unified
fight with shit like that.
Doesn't divide, and it's I was actually talking about this with Matt Wilkinson, ex NME colleague and Beats One host now, but yeah, we were saying the same thing as what you just said. Like I was saying, how you look up at the people that came before you and you're like, damn, I wish I was around them. working for Mojo magazine has really given me that ability, because they use me for a certain section of the magazine, and it's normally, well, it's always portraits. And they seem to have been a lot of those 70s icons that I liked. So like David Johansen from New York Dolls. He ended up, I built a studio at my house at the time, and he came over and he was vaping and drinking cups of tea with me for like a couple of hours, and his wife was there, and you're just talking about those days. So to get that insight to those days, the 70s, and that scene, it's always special. So I had that again with Alan Vega, who was obviously in suicide. And I think actually it was one of the last people to photograph him before he sadly died, 78, I believe. And that was also at his place, and it was just me and him. And he's a big Mets baseball fan. So that year, they're awful. They're perennial losers. So it was nice to see him watching them, and they actually won the divisional championship that year. But he was telling me all about growing up in Flatbush in Brooklyn with Neil Diamond, and how suicide came about, and just telling me again stories about New York. So I would like always ask these questions and like get these people to like impart a little bit of those times and stories to me. Again, Stephen Malkmus, I did recently before all this COVID stuff.
Oh, yeah, that's a good one. I'd love to have a chat with him.
Yeah, and I wanted so badly to talk about his earlier days with Silver Jews, but David Berman had just recently passed away. So I didn't know if that would be too raw for him, but he was talking about, those early days of being in Jersey and playing in New York and going to the knitting factory and stuff, and seeing Galaxy 500 and his contemporaries. But every time you get a chance to meet these people, it's like, I'm not shy to like be inquisitive, basically. But that's not so much a funny story, but that's just relatable, hopefully.
Yeah.
But I got a good one. Dave Grohl. I'd met him obviously over the years a few times, shooting him, and I hadn't seen him for a bit. And I was had been to Medieval Times, which I don't know if you guys know what that is. It's an arena, and there's knights that literally fight and ride horses, and you eat like with your hands and drink massive jugs of beer and all that.
Oh yeah, I've seen that on what's that Jim Carrey film called? Cable Guy.
Yeah, exactly. Brilliant movie. So we done that, and we came back to a spot in Manhattan, the Jane Hotel, and they have this like roof bar deck, and we're still there with our like leftover Medieval Times crowns and swords or whatever, getting some drinks. And Dave turns up, and apparently he's like a super fan of Medieval Times and goes regularly. And he was like, "Oh, you guys, you just come from Medieval Times? Like, which one?" We're like, "The one in Jersey." He's like, "What color knight was yours?" Like, "I always get purple." I mean, we were like, "Green knight." He wasn't very good, but he's trying on the crown, and like such an affable person, like one of those nice guys in rock and roll tags. I can
imagine him kind of suiting that kind of medieval style, to be fair.
Yeah, the beard and the hair as well, and he's got that gruff voice. But the Franz Ferdinand single cover I did for Ulysses, like I was saying earlier, it was an instantaneous one. Alex lived down the road, like 4 blocks, and was like, "Oh, Guy, can you do the single cover for us?" I was like, "Fuck yeah, absolutely." Thinking like, "Oh, next week, and we'll meet up and talk about it." He's like, "Oh, no, like now. Can we do it now?" I was like, "Yeah." I put some trousers on and shoes, ran over to his, met the band, and they're like, "Okay, so the theme is we're getting all our favorite photographers to do an image where it looks like you've just walked in or stumbled upon a crime scene." I was like, "Okay, let's do that then," because he was adamant, like, "We got to do it now." And then I'm like, "All right, well, let's get on the street." And it was this time of year and dark and drizzling, and then so fortuitously an ambulance pulled up and parked and in the middle of the road and had its lights flashing, and I was like, "All right, let's use this quickly." So Alex was amazing. He was not worried about getting dirty, and was like the one who was basically the dead character, so he was on the floor a lot. with rigor mortis and stuff. He was really good. And the rest of the band were doing their thing around him. And we had literally like 5 minutes to shoot it before the ambulance driver came back being like, what are you fucking weirdos doing? And yeah, got that. Went back to his.
That's so cool.
Had a whiskey and we reviewed the photos and his whole team was there. And then they were like, yep, that's the one. And it was done just like that.
I was talking to someone recently and I didn't really realise how big Franz Ferdinand were in the States. But they're saying like they were probably the biggest band from the UK in America at that point.
I feel like everyone knows them here. Like it's a name that definitely people recognise. And yeah, for sure, they were selling out big venues. But I think they're at a level where they have maintained and will always have that same following, which is big. But I think, sure, there's probably English bands now that might have overtaken them in size of, you know, the draw or whatever. But yeah, they're I mean, they've been going a long time now. It's 2002 or, yeah.
Yeah, and they were like 30 when they first started as well. So.
Yeah. Yeah, that is true. So they're still going, but a new lineup, I guess. But yeah, anyway,
did one of them leave or something? Yeah,
I think a couple have left now and been replaced. But yeah, also I wanted to touch on a little bit more the DIY scene here because I really feel like that needs bigging up, and like that was like such a for me to find those people, that band, and the space that they created. It was really important, and I guess to keep a DIY venue going for like 9 years is impressive anyway. But they recorded every single show, which again was like, oh, that's fucking cool. So they've got an archive now that anyone can go and listen, and they have, you know, it was a curated space for new bands, but also Conor Oberst would turn up and play, or Harmar Superstars played, and whoever, you know, there would be occasional drop-ins of like big names. But yeah, every show is recorded, and honestly, I think that space kept people together. One of the main proponents of the place, who wasn't actually involved in the running of it but became like its biggest fan, was our friend Mark Fletcher, who had a band called Stringer, and he said that we lost him just over a year ago. And I think honestly, if that venue had still been around and that community space, we might still have Mark with us. So yeah, I just wanted to give them a shout out. The So-So Glows, Alex, Rish, Ryan, Matt, and Zach. Some of the loveliest people. So if you're ever in New York, try and find one of their shows, and you'll be equally as impressed with them, I guess, as I am. But
I don't know much about the So-So Glows. Like,
well, you know how I found out about them was Tim Chester did a story on them for NME in 2006 when they were just kind of kicking off, and they were like this punk band from New York, band of brothers, and kind of like the Cribs, kind of forced to play with each other because they're from Bay Ridge and there wasn't like a lot of music happening down there. So they made their own band, and it's great. It's one of these underappreciated bands of our time.
I've heard like a lot about them like more recently as well, and I'm definitely I need to look into it a bit more.
Yeah, you should put on Blowout and Kamikaze, those two records. But they're fucking awesome, and I guess they're like kind of my American equivalent of you lads. So that was like nice to find them. But yeah, and just again with no ego and no like that inclusivity that I've been searching for. I guess that's what they kind of brought to the table, as well as just being lovely people.
You mentioned Andrew Kendall. Did you have like kind of a community of photographers as well? Like, did you kind of like stick?
We did
to one another, kind of thing.
We did. We had a little gang, and obviously, you know, those of us who were working for NME, we all got on. It was like a rivalry, but a healthy one. Like, if someone couldn't cover a show, I would happily cover it for them, knowing they would do the same for me. So yeah, it was like sibling rivalry almost. But yeah, bunch of girls, bunch of guys. But Andrew was he was doing stuff with you. I think he did your first photos.
He did, yeah. He did he did quite a lot with us at the start, actually. And he was always at parties. That's what I remember.
Yeah,
So
definitely.
You'd always see him at 3 a.m. at someone's house. You know what I mean? I remember him getting loads of pictures with us. Oh God, they're on his site or on the internet somewhere. But there's pictures of us in a shower or something with this girl, and like I'll never forget like that house party that we were at, and like I'm just fully clothed in the shower, and then some crazy fan running around naked. But
yeah, I mean, he really
took them. I think
he documented a lot of that early stuff. You should probably get him on, but I'm waiting for him to release all that era of photos one day, because him and Peter obviously were very close for a while. So there's those shots of him and Wolfman in a hotel. I think it was the Columbia, maybe. But yeah, he's probably got loads of hidden gems. So you should definitely reach out to him. But I guess I was around and he was already there, and he was gracious enough to kind of take me under his wing a bit. And yeah, again, more of this inclusivity, and not this like, oh shit, his maybe competition or something, you know, like that just didn't exist. So it was lovely. Yeah.
Was you friends with Roger Sargent?
I knew Rog again just because he was doing all the Libertine stuff and a lot of Peter stuff. But you meet all these people through just being around and out. So I knew Rog. But yeah, I think it's funny because really from 2004 to 2007, that's all I was doing documenting of London. But I sure fitted in a lot, and the impact it had, it still resonates so wholeheartedly with me, even though it was probably 2.5 years of just documenting, but before I moved to New York. But man, I remember all that shit, and the pictures, of course, help you remember. And I don't think I'm never not smiling when I'm looking back at those.
Have you ever had like an exhibition of like photos from that time, or like general times?
One, let's say, of that time period, but it's something I'm trying to do more of. It gets expensive if it's a solo show, but I did one last year of Adam Green, and of that Cribs Adam Green tour, Minor Love and Ignore the Ignorant, at the Morrison Hotel Gallery in Soho. And that was like a big deal because they're like the name of music galleries, I guess. So we had an opening there, and that was a lot of fun, and yeah, it inspired me to like not sit on my ass and like do more of these types of things. But I would like to do a more broad one, and I'd like to do actually a group show with others from that era, because I think they're a lot of fun. But the Adam Green one was, it's called Honest by Honor, He Fell Down Upon Us, which is a line from one of the Minor Love tracks. Yeah, so that's actually on my website. And prints are still available. There's still a few left if anyone listening loves Adam Green as much as me. But yeah, that was quite a wild phase in both of our lives, I guess. So we were staying up a lot and going out a lot and experimenting, and I was there taking photos. So I really do have a lot of Adam stuff, more than I thought, but that's not a bad thing. And yeah, this gallery show was great, and there was a lot of love. A lot of people came out, and it was a good feeling. So yeah, something I should try and do more of.
Was Macaulay Culkin knocking around at that point as well with Adam Green?
He was, but honestly, I was just getting to know Mac, and he had gone through a lot of shit in terms of like just even being able to be out and walk the streets. You know what I mean? Like he still gets the attention, or the unwanted attention, for obviously his famous role in Home Alone. He's, I guess, found a place or a spot where he's more about or at ease with that now in his life. But yeah, because we just met, I wasn't going to be like, hey, pose for a portrait. But you know, there's certain people like that who I kind of do regret. Maybe I should have been a bit more forthright. But it's a fine line, and you don't want to push it. And I'm sure at some point that will happen. You know, so. But yeah, he's a really sweet guy. from our interactions, and funny.
I remember meeting Macaulay Culkin actually with Adam at Leeds Cockpit. And
Leeds Cockpit, that's random.
Yeah, and I'd only met him a couple of times, but yeah, I remember sat backstage with him, and yeah, I was dying to ask him loads of questions about Home Alone, but I didn't go there. I just played it real cool.
Yeah,
we sat there and polished off a bottle of Jack Daniels.
Much better. There you go.
So I guess just finish on, Guy, like where can people check out your stuff? Obviously you've got an Instagram and everything.
Yeah, obviously the Instagram is just my name, Guy Eppel, Eppel. I had the website that I'm atrociously bad at updating. Yeah, it would be my website and my Instagram, which I'm been using to post a lot of this era since I haven't been shooting. So it's been useful in that way to go through archives and kind of pick out some reworks and hidden gems that I hadn't even noticed. But it really sucks just not being able to shoot right now. So going a bit stir crazy. But yeah, Twitter I is more of my stupid thoughts I put out onto the world. So Instagram's your best spot for the photos.
Yeah, and you get some good stories with them as well.
Exactly. I like to give an insight, and hopefully it makes the photo more relatable. Yeah, hopefully there'll be some new projects happening soon, so I can share with all the world. But yeah, stay locked onto the Instagram, I guess.